Welcome to today's hearing of the Parliament of South Australia's Joint Committee on the Establishment of Adelaide University. My name's Dan Cregan, presiding member. To my right, we have Sarah Andrews, member for Gibson, Michael Brown, who's the member for Florey, Honourable Reggie Martin, who's a member of the Upper House to my left, John Gardner, for Morialta, Honourable Jean Lee, Honourable Connie Benares, Honourable Sarah Game, and joining us by teams is the Honourable Tammy Franks. Isaac, do you have an opening statement?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair, for having me here today, and also inviting the Adelaide SRC President Georgia Thomas. We really value the opportunity to be able to come and to contribute to this. So yes, my position is as the Student President of the University of South Australia and the Chair of the Board of the UniSA Student Association. And I'm glad that I heard my colleague refer to it in the same way a bit earlier, but I always like to start with the same question, which is who is the single biggest stakeholder in any university? And I think that answer is obvious. It's the students. Students are the workers and innovators that drive the future workers and innovators that drive our economy. They're the future researchers that allow for prosperity, and of course they're the citizens that help shape a fair and equitable society. So students are and should remain the core of what all universities do. Equity and access has always been something which is very important to UniSA students, many of whom are first in family and come from disadvantaged and low SES backgrounds. We now have the prospect of offering a world-class education to students right here in South Australia through this new institution, though in saying that, we do need to get it right and make sure that it's done in the correct way so that it does reach that goal. The mission of the new university, I think, captures that. It's a bold mission which aims to ensure that everyone in South Australia can get that kind of education, especially those who never dreamt that it would have been possible otherwise. So I sit here today as the son of two first-in-family university graduates, people who got the chance to go to university because of a vision which saw the expansion of higher education. And I'm lucky enough that 20 years after my father was given the chance to go to UniSA and change his life and his family's life for the better, that I'm able to sit as the president of that very institution which he was able to study at. So I'm here today to offer my support for this endeavour, which I believe to be a full realisation of that vision, a vision with students at its core. But it does need to be done right, and we have a couple of suggestions on things that could be changed in the Act to allow us to do that. Thank you.
Questions from members?
I'm happy to start.
Colleague Paris.
Thank you for appearing, Ms Solomon, and I'm glad you were here to hear the evidence of Ms Thomas, and I'll put the same questions to you for the record. You have highlighted some issues that you think need addressing, and again, given that we're going through this review process, that we've got this bill out for consultation, if there was a dialogue with your group, and ways and means of addressing the issues that you've highlighted to the committee, as were highlighted with Ms Thomas, then overall, are we supportive of the merger?
UniSA at the current time differs a little bit from the structure at the University of Adelaide in the sense that we, our student representation, I would like to think, is fairly sophisticated, and we have had dialogue with the Chancellor and with the Vice-Chancellor throughout that process. There were several opportunities for student leaders, not just members of USASA as the student union, but other student leaders across the university from academic backgrounds and specific units to come together to contribute to that conversation. And we were lucky enough to facilitate some of those conversations and help with some answers to that as well. The view at UniSA, and I think it comes from the slight difference in demographic there, that UniSA students have always been of the mind, even in 2019 where there was a previous discussion about something similar, they've always been of the mind that if it's good for students, we support it. If it's not good for students, we don't support it. there's a couple of guarantees that they want in the new institution. They want to know that they're going to get a higher quality education out of having a new university. They want to know that they're going to have a better quality student experience, and that's a core point, because while everyone comes to university to study and to get a degree, it's important to note that that's not all that a university is. Anyone can go online and learn whatever you can search it up on YouTube, but there's a difference being part of that community and part of that culture, and that student experience is something which students really value and can be a determining factor in where students decide to go to university. So a better quality student experience is up there with the important factors that contribute to whether students are in support of this or not. Through the conversations that we've had, we believe that that USASA has had with the leadership of the university, we believe that high quality education and a better student experience is achievable, but there are a couple of things that we would like to see as guarantees before moving further along with that process, and if we can do those, we support it. But it's hard. UniSA students, many of whom come from, as I said, low SES and disadvantaged backgrounds, means that people really value that opportunity for students who wouldn't otherwise have got the opportunity to get an education to get one, and that is something that needs to continue in the new institution if it comes about.
Thank you, and I'm pleased to hear that you have had the level of engagement that you've had with leadership. So now there is another process overlapping that, and that is one of a parliamentary process and also a consultation process. So if you had the same sort of dialogue in those discussions that are taking place and the negotiation processes pending the final outcome of a bill that's debated, then and you're able to secure those minimum benchmarks that you want, would that satisfy you?
I think so. We've, as I said, we've had engagement with the leadership of our university, but we're lucky enough to have strong involvement throughout all levels of decision making within the university. We have something which we pride ourselves on called the Student Voice Initiative at UniSA, and that, as mentioned here, but at its core is really about any level where decisions are being made about students are involved in that decision making. So we're very fortunate in the sense that students are able to come to other student leaders and talk about the things that are important to them, and that's able to be discussed at the very top levels of the university in coming to these kind of decisions. I myself sit on the council of the University of South Australia, though today I'm here in my capacity as the Student Union President. So that means that we've had engagements as the student organisation with students across the university, and I think that they have voiced concerns with me and with other student leaders that if these changes were to be reflected in the Act, I believe would be covered by those changes.
Thank you. And just finally, do you think that there's something to be said about the other question that I asked around timing and the uncertainty that students are currently facing, and that really, doing this in a tight time frame, getting the outcomes that would satisfy your council and satisfy students is better overall for those students and their experience, and allowing them to make an informed decision rather than leaving them in the unknown for a protracted period of time?
Yes, timing is a hard thing because there is never a right time for progress. There is never a right time for reform. I think engagement is really important, and what the commitments that we've got from the universities and the management of the universities is that a lot of things, like, for example, curriculum will be done through a co-design process, and that's a really important part of this. It will be done through a co-design process, and the student experience, determining what that looks like, will be up to the student bodies. That there's a lot that goes into an institution which can't be figured out in the legislation, and that's going to be the important part, is what comes after. If the Act passes, what comes after that. And so it's getting those guarantees from the leadership of the universities that is going to be meaningful and really engage students to an extent that maybe hasn't happened prior to the decision to move forward with the Act. It needs to be to a greater extent.
Thank you.
Honourable Tammy Franks.
All right, I can't work out the picture, but I'm muted myself. Sorry about that. Thanks, Isaac, for sharing that experience. It sounds like a different one to the students at the University of Adelaide, but I'm going to ask you whether you would agree with their presentation that a student body should be in the actual legislation that Parliament passes should we progress this merger.
I think there's some. Thank you for the question. I think there's some core principles that should surround the creation of a student organisation or a student union, and those independence is one of those key ones. You can have an independent student organisation and have it within the Act. Currently, USASA as a student organisation does not sit within the University of South Australia Act. So obviously, the Adelaide University Union does sit within the University of Adelaide Act. I see some of the importance that was mentioned by Georgia Thomas of having it in the Act, though our experience is it doesn't necessarily need to be, but as long as it has those core principles, which is that it's independent and that it's a completely new student organisation. It can't be a continuation of a previous student organisation. Much like the universities, it's not about one taking over the other. It has to be a combination of the best of both worlds. If the way to achieve that is through having it in the Act, then that's something that I would like to see. Though, once again, it's a question about what that really achieves, and I'd certainly be open to having that discussion about having it in the Act and exactly what that looks like. But it can't be, as is currently in the University of Adelaide Act, as a continuation of the previous iteration of the Adelaide University Union, because it needs to be something new, contemporary, and it needs to take into account the nature of the new institution.
Thank you. And in terms of the transition process and ongoing University Council representation, what are USAS's views on that, and how are they informed, if at all, by the interim report of the Accord?
Thank you. It depends on the size and nature of the council. Obviously, the Accord has made some suggestions about having council representation, which is reflective of more reflective of expertise within the higher education sector. I think we welcome that. We welcome some of those suggestions that were made in the University Accord. Something that changes across universities is the size of councils. We're certainly supportive of what I believe is the same position as the Adelaide SRC of having those 5 representatives on that council. Though failing that, and if we were to have a council of the same kind of composition, which is currently with the 2 institutions and what is currently in the Act, we wanted to add that having the student union president ex officio on the council is quite valuable, because that I think part of student voice and part of having really robust student representation at the university is about recognising that biggest stakeholder in the university, not just as some abstract idea, but when you have students in the room who are talking to you, who are there, who are part of that decision making, it's really challenging to forget exactly why you're there, and it's good to have them informing decisions and being part of those really robust discussions. So that disconnect that can sometimes occur between the student union and the university council can lead to some very adversarial sort of outcomes, and so we believe that having the student union president on council as well is really valuable, because it when you're part of those decision-making bodies, it also it creates a better relationship between those bodies, but it also makes it harder to, in some circumstances, for university management, but also students, to pass the buck when things aren't going the way that they should.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Further questions? Member for Florey.
Mr. Solomon, just listening to your evidence before, so is it the student unions and student association, I should say, student association, and also your own view that going forward, provided that the student union and the student association are properly resourced, actually what I should say is the new student body, whatever it happens to be called, is properly resourced to provide assistance in the transitional period, that you're confident that the student experience will be enhanced, the way to make sure that you are properly resourced is to potentially provide for recognition of the Act, but make sure that you provide with funding assurances and so sorts of that.
There is, and I don't have the exact figures with me at the moment, but there is some initial sort of research which has been done by student organisations in regard to the way that student organisations spend funds compared to universities, and student organisations are, on the most part, more efficient and effective in doing that. They're also almost always at the coalface of what is going on in terms of student experience, and I think that student organisations are best equipped to enhance the student experience. The role of a student organisation is very diverse. Sometimes it's sitting in a forum like this. Sometimes it's deliberating on high-level policy at a university. Other times it's hosting fun events out on campus and talking to students and eating food and things like that. But those are all things which are valued by students. I think that the guarantee of funding is important, because it gives that ability for the student organisation to do what it's best at, which is to enhance the student experience. In terms of contributing, I think that the student organisation, as both the representative body elected by students and as the organisation which engages with students on a daily basis, is also best positioned to inform what student experience looks like at a new university. That answers the question.
I think so. So basically, what we think you're saying, trying to tell us, is that you are confident that following this experience, it's going to be a better student experience for students at Adelaide University than currently exists at the University of Adelaide and University of South Australia, provided that there's a partnership with students in the forms of their representatives.
I think there are certain measures, and I believe that the funding guarantee is one of them, which ensures that happens. But particularly USASA, I mean, our mission is to empower students in all aspects of their university life, and empowering students to have a say in what this new institution looks like will certainly go a long way to delivering a better student experience. I believe if they are appropriately empowered, if students are appropriately empowered to have a say in what the future institution looks like, you will get a better student experience at the new institution.
Honourable Sarah Kane.
Thank you. I just was wondering whether you shared the sentiment we heard earlier that the students at the University of SA are feeling more positive generally than the University of Adelaide, and how you would describe the cultural differences between the campuses, and whether you perceive any cultural challenges.
Culture is it's such an expansive thing, and there's different aspects to culture as well. There's a sense of pride in the university that you come from, and I think that's been evident throughout this process. There is a real sense of pride for students, though in determining culture you might find that there's certain aspects where the two nursing schools have a culture that's more common to both of them than either of the nursing schools have with, you know, the aviation school. I think that's an important thing to consider in this, that culture is not one consistent thing across the whole university, though there are overarching aspects of culture throughout the institutions. As was stated, UniSA students generally feel maybe slightly more positive about this than counterparts at Adelaide. UniSA was founded by a merger of institutions, and that was for a very specific purpose, which I alluded to in my opening statement. We're very accustomed to change, and I would think that we're a very contemporary university in the sense that we that students are really ready to embrace that, and a lot of people who go there have slightly different expectations because they are from low SES backgrounds or backgrounds that are less common to get into university. So there is at the current time a slight difference in culture, but I think there are positive and negative aspects of both cultures, and if you can leverage the more positive aspects of both cultures, I think that you can create something which is actually better than either of the two existing institutions. That's going to be a challenge, but I think that's a challenge that everyone's ready for.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Isaac, for your evidence today. It's most helpful, and also for your written submissions.
Oh, thank you.
A transcript of today's hearing will be made available shortly.
Always. Thank you.
We'll adjourn momentarily for a brief